Hey guys, tonight we slip off our cozy blankets and step straight into the not-so-cozy dawn of the Middle Ages. Imagine this. Instead of the gentle buzz of your phone alarm or the distant rumble of a garbage truck, you're yanked out of sleep by the deafening clang of a church bell. No snooze button, no negotiating 5 more minutes. You're sleeping on a straw mattress that's doing absolutely nothing for your spine, under a rough wool blanket that smells suspiciously like wet sheep. And it's cold. Not need an extra sock cold, more like see your breath inside your house kind of cold. You blink against the darkness. The sun isn't even up yet, but your village is already stirring. No blackout curtains, no mood lighting, just the flicker of a tallow candle if you can afford it. Otherwise, you're bumping around in the dark, trying not to trip over your one set of shoes. And yes, you share your small wooden cottage with your entire family, siblings, parents, and maybe even a couple chickens if they're lucky enough to be inside for the night. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your body aches, but there's no such thing as a rest day. You slept in your clothes because changing outfits is a luxury for nobility, and those clothes have been worn every single day this week, possibly all month. They're made from coarse linen or wool, both of which itch like mad. And there's no tag saying machine washable. You wash them by hand, if at all, in water that probably hasn't seen soap since Easter. You trudge outside, and your bare feet sink into the cold, wet mud. No paved streets here, just muck and manure. Everything stinks a little, or a lot. Historians still argue whether medieval people were truly nose-blind to the constant stench, or if they just gritted their teeth and pretended not to notice. Breakfast? Don't count on pancakes. Your morning meal is a hunk of stale rye bread and a bit of weak ale. Yes, beer for breakfast, because the water's so filthy it could kill you. Literally. Boiling isn't really a household practice, and the concept of germs hasn't even been born yet. You may have heard people sometimes added herbs to purify their drinks. One quirky medieval flavour enhancer was wormwood. Tasty, if you enjoy hints of bitterness and mild hallucinations. By now, your teeth are already protesting the gritty bread. Medieval millstones dropped stone dust into the flour, so everyone chewed their way through their dental health with every bite. You stretch, crack your back, which might not uncrack, and face the day's work. No vacation days, no sick leave. You've got to work the land, care for animals, or if you're particularly unlucky today, clean out the thatch from your roof to get rid of the rats. Meanwhile, the church looms nearby. That bell you woke up to, it rings again, and again. It marks everything. Sunrise prayers, midday prayers, end-of-day prayers. Time isn't counted in hours and minutes, it's in matins, vespers, and compline. And no, you don't really have the option to skip, not unless you want some very disapproving glances, or worse, fines. Your job, assuming you're a peasant, and let's be honest you are, is repetitive and crushing. Ploughing, sowing, harvesting, all with wooden tools and nothing but your back and a bit of ox muscle to help. The soil is rocky, your hands are blistered, and that sun, not exactly a friendly glow. It bakes you in summer and hides in winter, but either way, you're out in it. Still think you could hack it? Let's add a fun fact to your misery soup. The average medieval peasant consumed between 3,000 and 4,000 calories a day. Sounds generous, right? But here's the catch. They burned nearly all of it just to survive. There were no ergonomic tools, no unions, no protective gear, just raw human labour. And if you were a woman, surprise, You still worked the fields and maintained the home, and possibly gave birth in between digging up turnips, multitasking medieval style. Oh, and hygiene. We'll dive deeper later, but suffice it to say, you smell. Everyone smells. Even the Lord of the Manor smells. Some people believed bathing too often could make you sick. So instead, they masked it with perfumes or just embraced the musk. At least you won't stand out. Silver linings, right? You rub your eyes as the day drags on. Your joints throb from the cold. There's no Advil. There's a root someone once swore helped, but it mostly just numbs your tongue. You start to wonder, what happens if I twist my ankle or fall ill? Don't worry, we'll get to that nightmare soon. For now, you just keep working. Because if you stop, there's no safety net, no government welfare, no sick days. You eat only what you grow. And if the weather's bad or a lord's taxes are too high, you go hungry. Some historians claim peasants occasionally found joy in community festivals or simple pastimes, singing, dancing, storytelling. Others argue these breaks were few and far between, and more about religious obligation than relaxation. Either way, it's not enough to recharge your battery, because, plot twist, you are the battery. Still feel like you'd last the day? We haven't even gotten to the part where it rains and your roof leaks right into your soup bowl, or the neighbour's pigs break into your meagre vegetable patch, or the local priest accuses you of some vague sin and demands a donation you can't afford, and through it all, you just keep going. Because there's no other choice. You're still blinking the sleep from your eyes when your stomach makes a sound that could terrify small animals. You're starving. Not, I skipped breakfast hungry. More like, haven't eaten since dusk yesterday and burned 2,000 calories digging a trench with a wooden shovel, hungry. And now it's time for what your neighbours generously call breakfast. You glance at the meagre offerings. A lump of barley bread, hard enough to be a medieval weapon. It's crusty, slightly mouldy, and dotted with little black specks. Is that ash from the hearth? Or maybe some creative extra protein? Either way, you're chewing it. Slowly. Very slowly. Because you only get one piece, and you don't want to chip a tooth. Again. If you're lucky, there's a smear of lard to go with it, slathered thick like butter, except it tastes more like salty candle wax. And today's ale is unusually tangy, a little too tangy. You lower the clay cup and squint. Yep, something's floating in it. Could be a barley husk, could be not. Either way, you sip it again. The ale isn't just for flavour, it's safer than water, and it dulls the constant hunger just enough to get you moving. The taste of barley dominates everything. It's the medieval culinary MVP. Barley bread, barley porridge, barley ale. Wheat is for the rich. Rye if you're borderline fancy. But barley, that's the food of the dirt-smeared masses. You spoon some into your mouth. Lukewarm gruel this time, spiced with a pinch of salt and a whole lot of disappointment. Some scholars point out that medieval peasants actually had diets with decent calories, especially during harvest. But the nutritional diversity, not so much. You might go months without a proper source of vitamin C until your teeth start falling out and someone says, "Oh, you must be cursed." You reach for a dried apple slice and it fights back with the toughness of beef jerky. It's not sweet, it's chewy, almost leathery. You're grateful for it anyway. It's fruit, kind of. And in this century, that's practically a delicacy. Just as you're trying to savour the final spoonful of porridge, something skitters across the dirt floor. You freeze. Yep, it's a beetle, or maybe a weevil. It scurries under the edge of the hearth, right where the grain sacks are kept. You sigh. The grain's been infested since last week, but there's no throwing it out. Bugs mean extra protein. And here's your fun fringe fact. People back then didn't just tolerate bugs. They sometimes considered them a sign the food was safe. If weevils were alive in the sack, at least the grain wasn't poisoned. Silver linings again. You lean back against the wooden post holding up the roof. The smoke from last night's fire is still hanging in the air, choking your lungs with a damp campfire scent. There's no chimney, just a hole in the roof, and it's not doing its job. You cough once, twice, and your eyes start to water. But hey, at least the smoke keeps the flies down. Historians still argue whether medieval people designed their houses to trap smoke on purpose for that reason, or if it was just poor construction. As you clean up, a child runs past you chasing a goose, and you nearly trip over the firewood stack. You're tired, underfed, and one twisted ankle away from becoming the village cautionary tale. Still, it's time to get moving. On the way out, you glance at your neighbour's table. They're having roughly the same breakfast: barley, ale, despair. With one exception, they've got a tiny smear of honey. You stare longingly. Honey's rare and prized, not just for taste, but because it's the only preservative people trust. Sugar is something you've heard of, but never actually tasted. Unless you're in a coastal village with trade access, sugar's as foreign to your world as Wi-Fi. As you walk out the door, ducking to avoid hitting your head on the low frame, you remember something important. It's fast day, one of many scattered through the Christian calendar. That means no meat or dairy or eggs, just fish, vegetables, and grains. You look at your barley loaf and try not to cry. Medieval folks fasted around 100 days a year. That's a third of your entire life spent pretending lentils are exciting. Outside, the chickens are squawking. You think briefly about eggs, but they're not yours. They belong to the manor, and stealing one is technically a crime. Yes, even if it's just lying there, unguarded, begging to be boiled, you could get whipped. Or worse. Oh, and you better hope your breakfast stays down. Not because it's spoiled, though it probably is, but because if you're sick, there's no ginger ale or saltines to fall back on. And no one really knows why you're sick. Maybe your humours are out of balance. Maybe it's the alignment of Venus. Maybe you touched a cursed rock. People in your village might try a poultice made of crushed snails and rosemary. Or they might just suggest you pray harder, real hard. You rub your stomach and hope for the best. Back inside, the bread scraps go to the pigs if they're lucky. Or the dog. Or maybe a rat gets there first. You're not throwing anything away. Waste isn't a concept, it's a sin. Everything has a use. Even the ashes from the hearth might get saved to make a rudimentary soap. Not that you'll see it. That's a luxury for market day. Maybe. And so, with your gut half full and your energy already lagging, you step out into the fields, or the tannery, or the butcher's shack, or wherever your daily grind takes you. The one thing you can count on. You'll be hungry again by mid-morning. But don't worry, lunch is only 6 hours away. And yes, it's also barley. Your legs are already sore and the sun hasn't even cleared the trees yet. No matter, there's work to do. Because in medieval times, the land doesn't care if you slept wrong or skipped your morning stretch. It demands your sweat, your time, and, if you're especially unlucky today, maybe a finger or two. You trudge through the mud, clutching your wooden hoe, and try not to trip over the exposed roots and jagged stones littering the field. There's no such thing as a smooth surface here. Paths are for nobles. You work where the land allows it, with whatever primitive tools your community cobbled together. A plough, if you're fortunate. Usually, it's just your aching back and a deeply personal relationship with the soil. The damp earth clings to your boots, adding weight with every step. Your arms already burn and you've only just begun. No tractor, no wheelbarrow, not even a decent pair of gloves. Just splinters, calluses, and the occasional stab of something sharp buried in the dirt. A bone, a shard of pottery. You toss it aside without looking too closely. For a moment, the breeze lifts the scent of tilled earth, and cow dung, and maybe your neighbour's chamber pot dumped just over the hill. You try not to breathe too deeply. What exactly are you planting today? Mostly grains, barley, rye, oats, maybe some beans if the soil's generous. You're not farming for variety, you're farming for survival. And crop rotation? That idea is still a few centuries away from catching on widely. The soil is tired, just like you. Historians still argue whether the average medieval peasant had a simple but sustainable relationship with the land, or if they were stuck in an endless loop of barely getting by farming. Based on your current back pain, you're guessing the latter. Mid-morning comes. The sun climbs, and your tunic is now soaked through with sweat. Wool doesn't breathe, it just traps the heat, so you simmer slowly inside your own clothes. You wipe your brow with a grimy sleeve and glance up at the sky. Blue, cloudless, and merciless. There's no sunscreen. The closest thing you've got is smearing mud on your face. Or, if you're extra fancy, you might have heard of someone using a paste made with lead or even crocodile dung. Yes, really, that's one of those quirky practices that probably didn't work and absolutely didn't smell great. You take a swig from your clay jug, filled with weak ale that's gone a bit sour. It doesn't help. Your mouth still tastes like sweat and sadness. You hear a shout and look up. A fellow peasant's ox has collapsed. Heat stroke probably. You rush over to help, only to find yourself ankle deep in muck again. The ox twitches, wheezes, and then goes still. That's it. That was their only ox. No backup plan. No spare. You all stand there silent, wondering if your turn is next. You return to your row, eyes glazed, hands raw. And then comes the moment you've been dreading. The arrival of the reeve, the man who answers to the local lord, here to check your progress and collect dues. You lower your head and mumble the proper greetings. He inspects your field like he's appraising a mansion. Never mind that you've been up since before dawn. He points out patches where the seedlings look thin. He frowns at your slow progress. He doesn't offer help, just a tally of what you'll owe come harvest. A portion of this land's yield goes to the Lord, automatically. Another chunk to the church. What's left? Hopefully enough for you and your family not to starve through winter. Taxes in kind, grain, eggs, chickens, mean you're always behind. If your crops fail, you don't pay less. You just owe a bigger debt. Some lords are fair, others not so much. You get back to work. Time slips. Your body moves on instinct now. The swing of the hoe, the scrape of the rake, the stoop of your spine as you inspect the rows. And just when you think you've got a rhythm, your stomach growls. Loudly. It's still not lunchtime. To distract yourself, you hum a tune. A little folk song passed down through generations. It's repetitive, but it helps. Across the field, someone else starts singing too. The melodies clash, but you smile. Music's one of the few joys you're allowed, and it's free. No permits, no subscriptions, no copyright strikes. There's a faint rustle in the hedgerow. You freeze. Could be a fox, could be bandits, or worse, tax collectors. You peer through the leaves and spot a rabbit. Your mouth waters. You reach for the sling you keep tucked in your belt, but stop. Poaching is illegal. The forest belongs to the Lord, even the rabbits. If you're caught, it's a whipping, maybe worse. A chicken thief last month lost a hand. You let the rabbit go. By the time the bell tolls from the chapel, you've worked 6 straight hours. Your muscles are trembling, your stomach is aching, and your face is tight from the sun. This is a normal day. It doesn't get easier. You don't build endurance, you just wear down slower. Lunch isn't served. Lunch is whatever you brought with you. Usually another hunk of barley bread, maybe an onion. You eat it sitting on a rock, staring at the fields that own you. No utensils, no napkin, just fingers and teeth. And you eat fast. There's still half a field left. Somewhere in the distance you hear thunder. You hope it's your imagination. Rain today means the field floods and your work is ruined. No planting, no harvest, no dinner. But the sky's darkening. You sigh and get back up. Your hands are raw, your lips are dry, and you can already feel the first fat drop hit the back of your neck. Time to work faster. Because here in medieval times, the land doesn't care about your plans. It never did. You're dragging your feet home, soaked in sweat and probably someone else's ox drool, when you feel that old familiar ache rise in your jaw. It starts subtle, just a tightness near your molars, but within minutes, it's a dull, throbbing pain that shoots up your temple like a firework of misery. Great, a toothache. In 2025, you'd book a dentist appointment, get numbed, and be binge-watching cat videos by afternoon. But here, in medieval times, that pain in your mouth is the opening act to what could be a fatal saga. You reach into your belt pouch and pull out your only defense, a sliver of stale sage and maybe a pinch of crushed garlic. That's your medicine cabinet, and it's about as helpful as whispering soothing affirmations to the tooth. The pain intensifies. At some point, people in the village start noticing your grimace. One of the older women clucks her tongue and mutters something about toothworms. Yes, worms. That was a common belief in medieval Europe. Historians still argue whether this was a literal belief or more symbolic, but one thing's clear. They thought the cause of dental pain was tiny, squirming creatures burrowing into your teeth. No one understands plaque, or nerves, or infections. So when the pain grows unbearable, and it will, you go to the local barber surgeon. He does haircuts, boils, and battlefield amputations, all with the same knife and zero formal training. You're not exactly thrilled, but you have no choice. His hut smells like blood and feet, and the tools on the table look like they've been used on livestock. There's a set of rusty forceps, a jar of leeches, and something that might be a hammer. You sit in a rickety chair. There's no anesthetic, unless you count that cup of ale he just handed you. 1, 2, 3, crack. The tooth is out, along with what feels like a piece of your soul. You scream, not because you're dramatic, but because something inside your head just snapped. He hands you a rag for the blood, pats your shoulder, and says, "You'll be fine." You won't be fine. There's a real chance the socket gets infected. Pus, fever, sepsis, death. And what will they call it? A punishment from God, or perhaps an imbalance of your bodily humours. Some might even say you're cursed. One quirky treatment involves placing a fried frog against your jaw to draw out the pain. Another involves dried mouse ashes. For real. You make it home somehow, still dripping blood. There's no bed waiting, just a straw pallet, probably infested with fleas. You lie down and try to breathe through the pain. Someone brings you a poultice made of crushed mint and vinegar. It burns, probably not helpful. You close your eyes and try to sleep, but the noise in your village never really stops. Babies cry, dogs bark, someone is always hammering or yelling. Soundproofing hasn't been invented, and walls are made from wattle and daub, basically sticks and mud. You hear your neighbour sneeze and mutter something in Latin, which may or may not be a curse. The next day, your jaw is swollen. Eating is out of the question. Talking hurts. Working hurts. Everything hurts. But unless you're on your deathbed, and even that is up for debate, you're expected to get back to the field. You're not exactly irreplaceable. This is the reality of medieval medicine. There are no sterile tools, no germ theory, no antibiotics. The four humours, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile, are how everyone understands health. If you're sick, you've got too much of one. The solution? Balancing them. Sometimes through diet, sometimes with leeches. Ah, yes, leeches. The go-to medical tool of the Middle Ages. Got a headache? Leeches. Fever? Leeches. Mysterious illness that might just be stress? More leeches. You're practically a walking buffet for them. And no, they don't always work, but they're creepy, available, and oddly satisfying to certain types of physicians. Still, the town's healer might suggest something else. A pilgrimage, a journey to a holy site, where the relic of a saint might offer divine healing. But that takes money, and time, and a stamina you clearly don't have. Sometimes they'll blame the stars. Astrology is a legitimate branch of medicine here. If Mars is misaligned, maybe that's why your molar exploded yesterday. Better luck next month. Some historians believe that despite all this, medieval people were surprisingly resilient. Their bodies adapted to constant hardship. Others argue that most people just suffered quietly. Pain was a constant companion, and since no one remembered a life without it, no one expected anything different. As your wound festers, because let's be real, it's not healing well, you start to hallucinate a little. You dream of rivers made of soup and pillows stuffed with down, a nice quiet room with curtains, a warm bath, real medicine. You wake up to the sound of a rooster screaming at your window. Your jaw is still throbbing. The fever hasn't broken. You're shaking. But there's barley to plant and a reeve who doesn't believe in sick days. Someone hands you a chunk of bread soaked in wine, an old folk remedy. It doesn't help, but at least it numbs you for a few minutes. You chew with the opposite side of your mouth and pray, because hope is free and medical insurance doesn't exist. Later, the village priest might stop by. He'll offer a blessing, maybe sprinkle holy water. If your swelling gets worse, he might prepare your last rites. He's seen this story before. And yet somehow, you keep going. Because there's no other option. You hold your jaw, breathe through your nose, and drag your aching limbs back to the fields. Just another day in a world where one cavity can kill you. The sun rises higher, but you barely notice it through the haze of pain and exhaustion. You're trying to ignore your swollen jaw, the way your breath smells like decay, and how your tunic now seems to cling to every sore spot on your body. But today, there's one small mercy. It's not market day, and it's not time to tithe. That means you might have time to wash. And by wash, of course, we mean something much less glamorous than what you're imagining. Forget warm showers, forget lather, forget steam. There's no scented shampoo, no bath bombs, no candlelight ambiance. Here in medieval times, bathing is a rare and complicated event, often saved for holidays, illnesses, or sheer necessity, like if you fall into a dung heap or get married. Sometimes it's once a week in summer, sometimes once a month, sometimes once a season, and even then, there's a good chance you're sharing your bath water with the rest of your household, possibly in descending order of status. Hope you're not the youngest. You head to the stream with a bucket and a sliver of rough cloth. Soap is a luxury, usually made of animal fat and wood ash if you have any at all. It smells utilitarian. You might have heard someone call it lye soap, and if you've got sensitive skin, prepare to be personally victimized by it. You strip down behind a clump of reeds, shivering in the open air. No privacy, not really. No towel either. The stream is ice cold and filled with mud, frogs, and who knows what. You splash the water onto your chest and try not to yelp too loudly. If the cold doesn't shock you into full consciousness, the stinging from the soap does. You scrub your arms and legs, taking care not to reopen that mysterious scab on your knee. And just as you're starting to feel sort of clean, a breeze kicks up and covers your wet skin with a fresh layer of goosebumps and grit. Great. You towel off with your shirt and get dressed again in the same outfit you've worn all week. Congratulations. You're technically cleaner now, but you still feel like a walking compost bin. Some towns have bathhouses, which sounds promising, until you see them. Public, dimly lit, and often gender mixed. These were social centres, just as much as hygiene stations. If you're lucky, the water was changed recently. If not, you're climbing into a stew of strangers and yesterday's regrets. Also, those bathhouses eventually got blamed for spreading the plague. Because of course they did. Historians still argue whether bathing was truly rare across all classes, or if it simply fell out of favour over time, especially as religious leaders grew suspicious of nudity and indulgence. By the later Middle Ages, some even suggested bathing too frequently could open your body to illness. Clean pores, apparently, were dangerous portals. You pull on your damp tunic and immediately feel it chafe in places you'd rather not discuss. Underwear? If you're male, you might have a linen loincloth, if it's laundry day. If you're female, you're wearing layers upon layers, a shift, a kirtle, maybe even a surcoat depending on the season. All of it heavy, itchy, and practically impossible to keep dry. Now, the lice. Let's talk about your tiny, six-legged roommates. They're everywhere. In your hair, in your clothes, and yes, probably in your bed. Nitpicking isn't a figure of speech. It's what you do every day to try and manage the infestation. Everyone has them. Nobles have them. Monks have them. You have them. Combing them out is a full-time job, and there's no tea tree oil in sight. You might use vinegar or rinse with salt water if you're creative, but mostly you just scratch and mutter. And it's not just lice, fleas too, and ticks and mites and flies. One particularly inventive method of pest control involves placing a piece of sticky tree resin near your bed to catch bugs. Another, smearing pig fat on your ankles and hoping it distracts the fleas from your more vital regions. Unclear if this works. It definitely doesn't smell better. Back at home, your floor is packed earth, cool in summer, freezing in winter, and always damp. Straw is laid down to absorb moisture, but it quickly becomes a breeding ground for mold and insects. You sweep it out occasionally and replace it with fresh straw, but the cycle continues. Personal hygiene tools. You might own a comb made of bone or wood, a rare treasure. Toothbrushes don't exist, not really, but chewing on twigs or linen rags is common. If you're rich, you might have a cloth soaked in mint oil to rub across your teeth. If you're poor, well, good luck. You sit near the fire to warm up and the smell of your own clothing rises to meet your nose. Smoky, sweaty, with undertones of barn animal. You'd complain, but honestly, this is just the normal village aroma. You all smell like this, and after a while, you stop noticing. Sort of. For all the grime, there's still an odd dignity to it. You wash when you can, with what you can, and when the holy days come around, you make an effort. You light some dried herbs to cover the stench. You brush out your tunic. You even rinse your feet. In a world this dirty, a little effort shines. Still, bathing is a chore, not a luxury. There's no candlelit tub scene here. No bubbles, no duck-shaped soap. Just you, the stream, and a lingering sense that clean is a moving target. You lie down that night with fresh lice bites, tangled hair, and the faintest memory of cool water on your back. And tomorrow, you'll be just as dirty by lunchtime. You're just beginning to drift off, itching faintly from another round of lice warfare, when you're jolted back to the waking world by shouting. Not the joyful, drunken kind you might hear after a festival, but sharp, commanding voices, and the clank of chainmail. That can only mean one thing. The Lord's men are nearby, and they're not here to chat. You scramble out of bed, careful not to knock over the candle stub. It's late, but in a medieval village, the feudal lord's needs don't respect sleep schedules. You throw on your rough wool cloak, still damp from the previous night's bath, so to speak, and hurry outside into the misty dark. The reeve is there again, and this time he's flanked by armoured guards. They're here to collect what's due: grain, eggs, maybe a goat, depending on your family's status and this year's harvest. You stand in the muddy lane with your neighbours, hearts thumping like badly tuned drums. You already gave your share last week. Or, at least you thought you did. Turns out, your share is whatever the Lord says it is. This is feudalism in action. The land you work, it belongs to him. Your cottage, technically his. Even your livestock, also his. You're a villain, legally bound to the manor. Not quite a slave, but not exactly free either. If you want to leave the village, you have to ask permission, in writing. And good luck if you're illiterate like, well, almost everyone. The guards aren't aggressive today, just intimidating. One has a mace that he keeps swinging in slow circles like he's petting a particularly violent cat. Another eyes your family's chicken like he's measuring its weight in gold. You give them what they ask for. You don't argue. Arguing doesn't go well in this century. Some villagers whisper about a man from a nearby hamlet who complained too loudly during tax season. The story goes he was put in the stocks and left there until someone remembered to feed him, which took days. Others say he disappeared, and the implication is less about magic and more about ditches. Historians still debate how brutal feudal justice truly was. Some lords were known for generosity and protection. Others, less father of the people, more warlord with paperwork. But the fact remains, you are not in charge. You don't vote. You don't appeal. You comply. Your thoughts drift to your cousin in the next village over. He once got caught hunting a deer on the Lord's land. A deer. It wasn't even a good one. Just old and limping. Still, poaching royal game is a hanging offence. He managed to bribe his way out with 2 sheep and a year's labour. The sheep never recovered emotionally. Neither did he. This, of course, isn't the only way authority bleeds into your daily life. Church and state are interwoven like the threads in your one and only tunic. Break a secular law, the reeve punishes you. Break a religious one. That's a sin, and the consequences might echo into eternity. For now, though, you're dealing with the secular kind. Once the guards leave, your neighbours exhale as one. Someone mutters a prayer. Someone else curses under their breath. You all shuffle back to your homes a little lighter in goods and a little heavier in fear. Inside, your family whispers about the next boon work. Days where peasants are expected to labour directly on the Lord's land. Unpaid, of course. You already work your fingers raw on your own plot, but now you'll be planting and harvesting for someone else too. Refuse, and you're penalised, or beaten, or both. The funny part? This system is considered orderly for its time. Everyone has their place. Everyone knows their role. The Lord protects you from raiders and thieves in theory. He provides justice, also in theory. In return, you give him your labour, your produce, and your silence. But it's not just the Lord you have to tiptoe around. His wife, the lady of the manor, has her own demands. Spinning, sewing, preparing herbs for her bath, which she actually takes, thank you very much. If you're a woman, you might get summoned to help. You'll work the manor kitchens, tend to her falcons, or sweep the rushes in the hall, all while being reminded that you're lucky to breathe such refined air. And heaven help you if you're attractive. One raised eyebrow from a nobleman and your reputation's in flames. Marriage offers dry up. Gossip blooms like a yeast infection in summer. Not that there's treatment for either. Back home, you gather your family's remaining grain and hide a small portion behind the hearthstone. Everyone does it. If you didn't, you'd starve before winter was halfway through. The trick is keeping it hidden and dry. 2 things your cottage isn't great at. Last year, mice got to it first. You're still emotionally recovering. As you do, your grandmother mutters old sayings. Keep your head down and your hands busy. The Lord's coin shines brightest when it's far from your purse. Never trust a smile on collection day. All probably good advice. You wonder what would happen if you just walked away, left the village, disappeared into the woods. But then what? You're not a skilled craftsman. You don't know Latin. You can't hunt well enough to live off the land. And even if you try to start over in another town, you need freedom papers. Without them, you're a runaway. Fair game for anyone who wants to drag you back, and they will. So no, you won't escape. You'll do what everyone does, survive quietly. You'll pay the taxes, fake a smile at the reeve, and pretend not to notice when your roof leaks directly onto your last sack of grain. And tomorrow, you'll do it all again. Because in this world, obedience isn't just expected, it's survival. The sky is finally turning a pale grey, a sign that the long morning is stretching into an even longer day. And for once, you're granted a break from the endless slog of farming. You're heading to town. Well, town is generous. It's more of a crowded crossroads with a market square, a well, and a few lopsided timber buildings that lean on each other like drunk uncles. Your nose detects it before your eyes do. The smell hits hard. It's like someone tried to make soup using cabbage, pig guts, and despair, and then spilled it into the gutter. The medieval market is alive, loud, and incredibly fragrant. You try to breathe through your mouth, but that just tastes worse. Everyone's sweating, animals are everywhere, and someone definitely just dumped a chamber pot into the alley next to the sausage vendor. That's not sausage water. You edge closer to the market stalls, dodging a goose that hisses like it owns the place. Chickens scuttle between your feet. A toddler with no pants screams joyfully from the middle of a muddy puddle. And then, you pass a pig carcass strung up by its feet, flies buzzing around like it's a 5-star hotel. Welcome to your shopping trip. You stop at a stall that offers, well, it's unclear what it offers. Piles of turnips, maybe. Something vaguely edible wrapped in leaves. The vendor gives you a toothless grin and tries to upsell a fresh eel that looks like it's already given up on life. You shake your head and move on. In a better world, this trip might feel festive. But right now, it's more like survival roulette. You're here to trade, not shop. Money exists, sure, but you don't have any. You've brought eggs, maybe a bit of rough-woven cloth, a few dried herbs, and you're hoping it's enough to score some soap or salt, or maybe, dream big, half a salted herring. Bartering is loud and full of lies. Everyone insists their goods are rare, vital, or blessed. That sheep skull? It's from a sacred breed. Those boots? Worn only once by a pilgrim. Historians still debate just how widespread actual coin usage was for peasants. But for you, bartering is the way of the world. No coins needed, just nerves of steel and maybe a strong stomach. Speaking of which, you're starting to regret skipping breakfast. You spot a woman selling hot meat pies. The smell is intoxicating until you see a rat dart out from beneath the cart. You pretend you didn't. You buy the pie anyway. Hunger has no standards. The first bite is chewy. You tell yourself it's pork. You don't ask questions. No one does. Further down, a man's shouting about miracle tonics. His booth is decorated with animal bones, shiny stones, and what looks like a dried lizard. He offers you a cure for bad humours. Just a sip, and your swollen jaw will be healed, your energy restored, your debts forgiven. Okay, not that last one, but the liquid is green and bubbling, and it smells like vinegar, met regret, and had a baby. You pass. Just barely. Next up, the fishmongers. The stench is overwhelming. Fish laid out in the sun, eyes glazed, flies doing what flies do best. But salted fish is valuable. Preserved food is lifeblood in winter. You might trade 2 days' labour for a slab of something that smells like old socks but keeps for months. Near the centre of the market square is something more grim. The hanging cage. Empty today, but it's there as a reminder. That's where thieves or those convicted by the manor court are displayed. Sometimes dead, sometimes just very, very uncomfortable. You remember the man who stole a loaf of bread during last year's lean months? His fingers were broken, publicly, one by one. You swallow hard and move on. Children tug at their parents' sleeves near the spice stall, eyes wide at the tiny piles of saffron and cinnamon. It's all behind glass, or rather, stained horn panels, because these are imported treasures. You can't even afford pepper. Even salt is precious. In fact, your village once paid part of its tax in salt. Literally, a salt tax. The word salary itself has roots in the Latin for salt. Strange, right? And then there's the church's corner. A monk stands beside a collection basket, offering tiny indulgences in exchange for donations. You've heard of these. Give some coins or goods and shave a few years off your time in purgatory. At least, that's the idea. Historians still argue about how corrupt this system really was. But standing here now, you can't help but notice the monk's sandals look suspiciously new. You finish your trades. You've managed a bit of lard, a chunk of rough salt, and some wilted greens that aren't technically dead yet. Not bad. You tuck them into your cloth sack and head for the well to take a last drink before walking home. You hesitate. The water's cloudy. You're weighing your options when a cow directly next to the well relieves itself. Decision made. No drink. The road home is slower, heavier. Your feet ache, your head is pounding, and your hands are sticky with something you don't want to identify. You look around at the other villagers heading back, all of you loaded down with goods, none of you smiling. As you walk, you hear someone scream, not in fear, just in frustration. A young woman's stall caught fire, probably from a spark off someone's cooking brazier. Everything she had to trade, gone in smoke. People gather. Some try to help. Others just watch. You keep walking. This is the market. It's chaotic, noisy, and more than a little dangerous. But it's also essential. If you want to eat something other than barley and grief, if you want a candle stub or a cleanish rag or some sort of questionable meat pie, it's here or nowhere. So you show up. You smile when you have to. You haggle until your throat's dry. You try not to breathe through your nose. And you survive, just barely. You finally get back from the market, your arms sore from carrying a sack of marginally edible success, and just as you lower yourself onto a rickety bench, the church bell tolls. Again and again. You groan. Not because you're surprised, because you're never surprised anymore, but because the tolling means it's time for yet another round of prayers. You sigh, pull your hood over your head, and shuffle toward the chapel, along with half the village. The other half already left at the first clang, because they're determined not to get another lecture about tardiness from Father Willard, who talks like he's got a personal wager with God about who can guilt you more. The medieval church is not optional. It's not just where you go on Sundays. It is your calendar, your law school, your news outlet, your hospital, and your therapist, a terrifyingly judgmental one at that. Every hour of your day is steeped in it. There's Mass, Vespers, Matins, Compline, Lauds. It's less of a routine and more of a full-time job. You step into the chapel and it's freezing. Stone walls, no heat. Just candles flickering from iron sconces and the musky scent of beeswax mixed with unwashed humanity. The air hums with whispered prayers. You sit, or rather kneel, on a splintery bench that leaves an impression in your bones. Literally. The floor's covered in rushes to absorb filth and scent, but it mostly smells like damp rot. You lower your head. Try to look pious. Try not to fall asleep. You don't understand the Latin being chanted. Nobody really does, except the priest, and even he fumbles sometimes. That's because the church doesn't believe the Bible should be read by the average peasant. Literacy is power, and power is carefully guarded. Historians still argue whether this deliberate gatekeeping was spiritual or political, or maybe both. Either way, you nod along to words you can't pass, praying to a God whose moods are interpreted through signs like bad harvests and goat miscarriages. The priest's sermon today is about sin. Again. He talks about gluttony, which feels like a cruel joke when your dinner last night was boiled cabbage and a spoonful of barley. Then lust, which is mostly theoretical for someone who shares a bedroom with 5 family members and a goat. Then sloth, your personal favourite, considering you haven't had a day off since your birth. You feel a sneeze coming on, but try to hold it in. Last time someone sneezed in the chapel, a woman 3 pews over crossed herself so hard she smacked her nose on the bench in front of her. You don't want to repeat. Eventually the service ends. Your knees pop as you stand. Someone passes the collection bowl. You toss in a single egg. You can't afford more. The priest raises an eyebrow. You pretend not to notice. He pretends to bless you. The church demands more than just eggs, though. There's the tithe. 10% of everything you grow, earn, and live on. Every year. It's the medieval version of a subscription plan you can't cancel. Don't pay, you're threatened with excommunication. A spiritual eviction notice with eternal consequences. Outside, a small crowd has gathered. A friar is preaching about indulgences, again. Pay a little coin, and you can shave years off your time in purgatory. It's the medieval equivalent of clearing your browser history. Want forgiveness? Drop a few coppers in the coffer and call it even. Or at least, that's the sales pitch. One fringe tidbit you overheard from a traveller last month. Some people believe you can buy indulgences for future sins. Like a sin gift card. You can practically hear the eye roll from the heavens. You start to walk away, but Father Willard calls out your name. Your heart stops for a second. You turn. He gestures you over. Your mind races. What did I do? What does he know? What does he think he knows? But all he says is that he noticed your limp. Offers to pray for your healing. And maybe stop by later with a few eggs or herbs. You smile and nod and back away slowly. That's how they get you. The church isn't all fear and control. Sometimes it's genuinely a force for comfort. If someone falls ill, it's the monks who come with leeches and holy water. If there's a dispute, it's the priest who mediates, assuming the outcome favors whoever donates the most. Monasteries even house libraries. You've never seen one, but you've heard of them. Pages filled with words, sometimes pictures, bound together like a brick of pure mystery. The idea that knowledge exists in such compact, unreachable form feels like magic. And in a way, it is. Most peasants never read a single word in their lives. Letters are like stars, distant, untouchable, and beautiful in ways you don't fully understand. You walk past the graveyard on your way back. The markers are crude, the soil freshly disturbed in more than one spot. Someone's buried there just this week. A baby, they say. Not even named yet. Didn't matter. The priest gave the child last rites and said it's now in God's hands. You shiver. Not from the cold, but from the reminder that salvation is as arbitrary as the weather. The church looms in your life like a mountain. Massive, immovable, and casting a shadow you can't ever quite escape. You don't hate it. Not really. It's all you've ever known. It's comfort. It's fear. It's both. As you pass the chapel again, the bells ring out once more. Evening prayer. You sigh. Of course they do. You're back at your cottage, trying to unwind. Though unwind, in medieval terms, means sitting on a bench made of questionable wood while pulling straw out of your socks. You're exhausted. Your back is a rebellion. Your jaw still pulses with the ghost of that pulled tooth. And you're seriously considering smuggling yourself into the next town, just to see if anyone there smells less like wet goat. But tonight, there's a festival, or a feast day, or possibly just someone's name day. Honestly, any excuse to drink a little and pretend you're not one windstorm away from homelessness. You dig out your best tunic from under the bed. It's marginally cleaner than the one you're wearing. That counts. Getting dressed in medieval times is less pick an outfit and more try not to get tangled in your own linen. For a man, it's a tunic, hose, and a belt to keep everything in place. For women, it's layers on layers, a chemise, a kirtle, maybe a surcoat, possibly a head covering, not because it's cold, though it usually is, but because exposed hair is apparently the gateway to sin. You manage to wrap yourself up without pulling anything out of joint, and then you begin the traditional medieval ritual. The itch check. Lice? Still there. Fleas? Oh, definitely. And if you're really lucky, you might find a tick tucked behind your knee like a tiny bloodthirsty stowaway. The festivities are held in the village green, which is mostly dirt and rocks with a few drunk chickens clucking around. Torches are lit. Music's playing, if you can call one guy with a hurdy-gurdy music. People are dancing, loosely. There's a jester juggling vegetables and a dog howling along like it's singing a tragic ballad. You notice what people are wearing and, let's be honest, it's not good. Most villagers own one outfit, maybe two. Clothes are patched, stained, and held together by hope and stubbornness. Fancy fashion is reserved for nobility, and it's the definition of beauty is pain. Take shoes, for instance. You're lucky to have any. They're flat, stiff, and made from a single piece of leather. Waterproofing? Ha! Arch support. Hilarious. They offer roughly the same comfort as wrapping your feet in old tree bark. Now glance over at the local lord and his entourage, who've graced the festivities with their presence. Their outfits are so over the top, it's like someone let a peacock loose in a fabric shop. The noblewomen are dressed in layers of velvet and brocade, so heavy and hot, they're basically portable ovens. Historians still debate whether some of the more outlandish fashion choices, like 3-foot-long shoes or absurdly tall headdresses, were meant to show wealth, signal status, or just win medieval fashion dares. Your own belt is made of rope. You feel very stylish. Someone nearby has a pot of something steaming over a fire. You wander over, tempted. It's pottage, a thick stew made from whatever ingredients are available. Usually barley, peas, onions, maybe the occasional sliver of meat if someone's feeling generous. It's bland but warm, and you're not picky. You spoon some into a clay bowl and try not to burn your tongue. It tastes fine. Possibly like yesterday's pottage, reheated with today's regret. You find a tree stump to sit on and quietly people watch. One couple is arguing about dowries. Another is arguing about pigs. A group of children is playing a game that looks like tag but has suspiciously violent rules. You sip your pottage and scratch your shin through your hose. A girl walks by wearing a garland of flowers and, you swear, lip colour made from crushed beetles. Not bad, honestly. Some medieval cosmetics were surprisingly effective, even if they occasionally involved things like lead, vinegar, or soot. Your neighbour once told you about a face cream made of pigeon droppings. You're still emotionally processing that. Then there's the smell again. You were briefly distracted, but now it's back in full force. Unwashed bodies, animals, fire smoke, and something distinctly cheese-like. It's everywhere. It clings to clothes, to the air, to your soul. And yet, no one reacts. This is the standard. In fact, noble perfumes were often designed to overpower this baseline bouquet. Musk, rosewater, ambergris, from Wales, by the way, layered on thick to cover what soap and water couldn't. You try not to think too hard about it as the music picks up. Someone grabs your hand, pulling you into the circle. You stumble through a basic step dance, flailing more than dancing. No one minds. Medieval dance is less elegant waltz and more sweaty group chaos. You're laughing now, a genuine moment of joy breaking through the haze of hardship. The music speeds up. Someone shouts, "Spin!" and you nearly take out a spectator with your elbow. You recover, dizzy but smiling. It's a rare moment of lightness. These feasts, however rough around the edges, are a lifeline. But even here, under the stars and torchlight, the rules don't disappear. A drunk man grabs a girl's arm. She pulls away. A guard intervenes. Not for her, of course. For the sake of decorum. The man's escorted out, still cursing. A warning is barked, loud and final. Everyone pretends nothing happened. Later in the evening, someone pulls out a puppet show. It's got the same themes as always: morality, virtue, the dangers of vanity, and maybe a dancing devil for laughs. The children shriek with glee, the adults chuckle, sip their ale, and nod like it's deeply philosophical. You watch, entertained and confused in equal measure. As the fire burns lower, people begin drifting away. You do too. The layers of wool itch more now. Your feet are sore. Your hands smell like turnip and sweat. But your belly is a little fuller, and your spirits just a little lighter. You crawl back into your straw bed, remove your shoes, carefully avoiding the lice traps, and settle down under your blanket. The flicker of fire from outside glows through the cracks in the wall. You're still dirty, still tired, still poor. But tonight, at least, you got to dance. Morning arrives, again, with all the grace of a bucket to the face. Your back cracks like an old wagon axle as you sit up in bed, still wearing yesterday's tunic. You're covered in straw, a little drool, and something that might be a beetle wing. You squint toward the window, which is just a hole covered in animal bladder, and sigh. Because today's one of those days. There's been a theft in the village. You can feel the tension in the air before you even open the door. A chicken's gone missing, and no, it's not funny. That bird was food, income, eggs, and luck rolled into one. And now the reeve is stomping around the village with 2 constables and a very large stick. Medieval justice isn't exactly what you'd call fair. There's no courtroom with a polished judge in a powdered wig. There's the manor court, presided over by the lord or his steward, and it's held wherever there's space: the barn, the green, or the manor hall if it's raining. Evidence? Optional. Lawyers? You get what you get. You're summoned, along with half the village, for questioning. You're not a suspect, but that won't stop anyone from eyeing your boots and wondering if you've got chicken feathers stuck to your socks. You stand in the crowd, hands clasped as the reeve paces dramatically. He starts calling names. One by one, your neighbours are questioned. One man claims to have seen something. Another claims he heard something. A third insists the thief left behind a bad aura, which, though vague, is treated like actual testimony. Historians still argue whether these community courts were run more by rumour than fact. Based on today's proceedings, it's a strong maybe. Someone is accused, a teenager, skinny as a fence post, who's already shaking like a leaf in a thunderstorm. The reeve calls for witnesses. One old woman steps forward. She says she saw him with feathers in his hair yesterday. That's it. That's the damning evidence. The crowd murmurs. You stay quiet. Everyone knows it's probably nonsense, but no one's going to speak up because the alternative is you becoming the new suspect. The teenager is dragged forward. He begs, cries, swears on St. Cuthbert's shin bone. No one listens. A punishment is decided. Stocks, you've seen them before. Wooden planks with holes for hands and head, set up in the middle of the village like a decoration from your worst nightmare. The boy is locked in, and the villagers are invited, encouraged even, to throw things. Not rocks usually, but old bread, dung, insults. Humiliation is the point. Rehabilitation isn't. This is just one option on the medieval punishment menu. Others include branding, whipping, ear cropping, or, if you're really unlucky, hanging. Yes, for stealing a chicken. The law is intentionally vague. The Lord decides what fits. You try not to make eye contact with anyone. This morning has already lasted 5 years. You shuffle back home. But something keeps nagging at you. That same old worry. What if you are next? Because justice in medieval times isn't just cruel, it's unpredictable. Take trial by ordeal, for instance. It still happens in some places. You might be ordered to carry a red-hot iron for a few steps. If your wounds heal clean, you're innocent. If not, well, guess you shouldn't have sinned. There's trial by water too. If you float, you're guilty. If you sink, congratulations. You're pure, and probably dead. One woman in a nearby village was accused of witchcraft because her bread rose too fast. Another for having a mole in an odd place. The lines between natural, sinful, and supernatural are blurry. Some villagers think the moon affects behaviour. Others think red hair means you've got the devil's temper. You pause to rub the back of your neck. A strange bump there. Hope no one notices. Even the language around law is terrifying. Words like ducking stool, pillory, and scold's bridle aren't torture devices in a dungeon. They're public tools of correction. You've seen the ducking stool, a contraption that dips people in water repeatedly until they confess or shut up. Usually used on women, often over gossip. Because yes, even talking too much can get you punished. And then there's the catch-all crime, heresy. Say the wrong thing about the church, question a saint, or read something you shouldn't, if you could read at all. And suddenly, you're not just a lawbreaker, you're a threat to eternal order. Burnings at the stake aren't common in your corner of the world, yet. But the fear is there. You try not to dwell on that as you return to your chores. But the boy in the stocks remains stuck in your mind, especially when the rain starts and no one moves to cover him. Not even his own mother. That's how scared everyone is. Later you overhear someone whisper that the real thief was a starving widow, and the boy only tried to help cover for her. Whether it's true or not, it doesn't matter. Justice has been served, and the manor court won't revisit a closed case. That would be chaos. You retreat into your home and check your few belongings. One loaf of bread, some pottage left from yesterday, and a tiny pouch of salt. Nothing worth stealing. But you still tuck them behind a loose stone in the wall, just in case. The door creaks as you close it. You bolt it shut. You're not a criminal, but that doesn't mean you're safe. It's night again, and the wind is howling against the thatched roof, like a hungry wolf. Or maybe it is a hungry wolf. You're not quite sure. Either way, you're cold. Not, I could use a sweater cold, but the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and stays there like unpaid rent. This is winter in medieval times. And spoiler alert, you're probably not going to make it to spring. The fire in your hearth has burned down to an unimpressive smoulder, and the smoke has nowhere to go. Your lungs are full of it. Your eyes sting. You try to throw on another blanket, but it's more of a burlap suggestion than a real source of warmth. You roll over and press your nose against your arm, hoping for even a little retained body heat. It smells like onions and disappointment. In the morning, the frost has crept in from the doorframe and turned the inside of your water jug into a medieval popsicle. You crack it open with the handle of your wooden spoon and take a cautious sip. It tastes like smoke. Everything tastes like smoke. You check on your preserved food stores. If you were lucky, you salted some fish, or dried a few root vegetables before the frost hit. But more likely, you're down to pottage scraps, barley, and an onion so old it may be planning its own escape. You eye the rat traps, empty, again. Historians still argue whether the Little Ice Age had truly begun during the early medieval period or crept in later. But there's no debate that winters were long, brutal, and wildly under-equipped. No insulation, no down jackets, no electric heating pad with 3 settings and a cute flannel cover. Just firewood, if you have it, and animal fat smeared on your boots for warmth. Speaking of boots, yours are starting to crack. Not metaphorically, literally. The leather's splitting at the toes, and you've stuffed them with straw to keep out the wind. It doesn't help. Nothing helps. You think briefly about wrapping your feet in cabbage leaves. Someone in the village swears by it. that same someone also eats moss for energy. You trudge outside for firewood, trying not to slip on the icy ground. Your breath fogs the air in little puffs like steam escaping from a tired kettle. Every step crunches, your hands ache, and your fingers feel like they belong to someone else, dead someone else. You pass by your neighbor's house and notice a cloth nailed over the doorway, a sign of sickness, or death, or both. No one enters, no one asks. There's no doctor coming, and even if there were, he'd probably show up with a dead squirrel and a prayer. You remember last winter when a family froze in their sleep. No one found them for days. When they did, they were curled together like spoons, frost etched across their faces like lace. Still, you gather what you can, splinters of wood, dry dung, whatever burns. Dung is useful in winter. You get over the smell fast, especially when your other option is not being warm. You bundle it under your arm and make the slow, shivering walk back. Inside, you pile the fuel on the fire and pray for something resembling heat. It sputters. It smokes. You cough. Again. Your fingers feel numb and your joints ache. That's the cold talking. Or maybe arthritis. Or maybe both. Your knees are starting to grind every time you move, and your shoulders crack like a crust of ice on a muddy puddle. For breakfast, cold barley mush. Again. You'd kill for an egg, but the hens stopped laying 3 weeks ago. It's too cold. They're smart like that. You're jealous. Some days, if you're lucky, you get to warm yourself in the barn. The animals at least generate body heat. You sit there sometimes with the pigs and pretend they're friends. They don't answer, but they don't complain either. That's good enough. Your clothes haven't dried properly in weeks. They smell of damp wool and regret. You try rubbing your hands together to bring some life back to them. The tips are pale, a little blue. You wonder if it's frostbite. You wonder what happens when toes fall off. You try not to wonder too hard. Some people huddle in groups at night to stay warm. Whole families pressed together in one bed. Privacy doesn't exist, but neither does central heating, so you take what you can get. Occasionally, there's some awkward coughing when someone gets too enthusiastic under the covers. You all pretend not to notice. To distract yourself, you sing a little. Old lullabies, simple tunes passed down through generations. One about a deer in the forest, another about a girl who turned into a bird and flew away from winter. You hum it quietly and hope no one hears you being sentimental. Outside, the wind picks up. It howls like a thing alive. You pull the blanket tighter and try not to imagine wolves at the door, because they've been at doors before. Sometimes they take livestock, sometimes worse. There are whispers about a boy who vanished last week on the road between villages. They say it was wolves, or bandits, or witches. No one knows. No one goes looking. He's just gone. You light another candle stub and let the wax drip onto your fingers. The warmth is sharp, small, but real. You consider doing it again just to feel something. But the wax is too valuable. You blow it out. You save it for later. You press your hands to your chest and curl up on the straw mattress. The cold is everywhere. In your bones, your clothes, your breath. And as you close your eyes, you whisper a little prayer. Not for spring, because spring is a myth right now, but just for the fire to stay burning through the night. Because in medieval times, winter doesn't kill you all at once. It starves you, freezes you, forgets you, and then it waits for next year. You wake up somehow, and not just from the cold. You're groggy, confused, and very, very thirsty. Your mouth feels like it's been lined with wool. Your head is pounding like a blacksmith's rhythm, and your first thought, "I need water," is immediately followed by your second. Oh no, not that water. Because here in the Middle Ages, drinking water is not what you think it is. It's not crisp. It's not fresh. It doesn't come from a chilled bottle with mounting graphics on the label. It comes from a communal well, or worse, a river that just so happens to double as a laundry site, waste disposal system, and possibly a duck pond. People wash, dump, rinse, and occasionally relieve themselves in it. The term waterborne illness hasn't been coined yet, but you're living it. So instead, you reach for the safer alternative. Beer. Weak ale, to be exact. You chug it straight from a clay jug that may or may not have been washed this month. It's warm, cloudy, and smells a little like someone tried to brew sadness and barley together. But it's liquid, it's calories, and most importantly, it's not going to give you dysentery. Probably. Congratulations, you are now buzzed before breakfast. Everyone is. Even the kids. See, medieval ale isn't like your modern double IPA with a fancy label and notes of citrus. This stuff is low in alcohol, usually around 2 to 3%, but consumed constantly. Morning, ale. Midday, ale. Thirsty while working in the fields, ale break. It's hydrating-ish, filling and brewed in-house or by local alewives. Yes, that was an actual title. Who runs small-scale operations with barrels, herbs, and a lot of hope. One fun, quirky tidbit. In some towns, ale testers were employed to literally lie down on beer-soaked benches to determine if the drink was watered down or bad. If their pants stuck, it was deemed too sugary. If they didn't stick, it meant the brewer had cut corners. Imagine explaining that job to your parents. Back to your day. Breakfast consists of some dark rye bread and maybe a bit of cheese that's seen better centuries. You chew slowly, nursing your ale and trying not to think about how much mold is too much mold. You decide to believe it adds flavour. There's no coffee, no tea. Those are exotic, distant, and extremely expensive. You've heard of them. Some trader once passed through bragging about blackleaf drinks, but that's the sort of thing nobles sip while judging the poor. Your version of caffeine is, get up and walk, or the Lord's Reeve will yell again. As you head out for your morning tasks, the buzz wears off quickly. That's the downside of low-alcohol ale. It doesn't last long, but by mid-morning, you'll likely top off with another cup, or two. It's not really drinking, not in the modern sense. It's survival. In the village square, a few people are already loud and red-faced. You can tell who's brewing strong ale illegally. That kind of drunkenness isn't from the safe stuff. One guy starts singing loudly about St. Bridget's goat. Another tries to climb a cart and recite the 10 Commandments out of order. No one stops them. Everyone's too tired. You pass the local tavern. It's little more than a smoky room with long tables, uneven benches, and a distinct smell of boiled meat and failure. The tavern keeper nods at you, already polishing a mug that never really gets clean. You're tempted to go inside, but you can't afford it. Even one strong cup could cost a whole egg or two. So you keep walking. At the communal baking oven, a few women are trading tips about which herbs make ale less bitter. Nettles, thyme, even bog myrtle. One woman swears by a dash of honey, though you suspect she just wants to show off. The conversation shifts naturally to gossip, childbirth, and what the priest said during last week's sermon about gluttony. Someone mentions old Miriam, who reportedly drinks a full pint before sunrise. You all pretend to be shocked, but secretly admire her stamina. You return home midday for your second meal, more ale, more barley mush, and maybe, if you're feeling festive, a strip of salted pork. It's chewy, and it tastes like something that once lived. You wash it down with another sip and lean back, the buzz just enough to take the edge off your tooth socket and your frozen toes. But not everyone gets ale. Water is the fallback, especially in poorer homes or among children, which, in turn, leads to regular outbreaks of stomach illnesses. You remember your younger brother vomiting for 3 straight days last winter after drinking river water. The local healer gave him a syrup made of fennel, wormwood and tears. He lived. Barely. Even the animals drink better than some people. The pigs have a trough full of rainwater, far cleaner than the bucket sitting in your kitchen. Historians often debate just how drunk medieval people were on a regular basis. Some argue that the low alcohol content made it safer than water, but not enough to impair people's functioning. Others believe the constant flow of ale led to a general dullness in society. Either way, you're not hammered. You're just buzzed all day, every day. It's hard to notice at this point. You don't really get drunk anymore. You just get less hungry, less cold, and less aware of how much your life kind of sucks. By evening, you're back at the hearth, sipping the dregs of a new jug. It's darker, stronger. Maybe someone over-fermented it. Your sister tries a sip and makes a face like she licked a frog. You nod approvingly. That's how you know it's good. The fire cracks low. Your limbs are heavy. Your brain is cotton. And just before you fall asleep, you remind yourself, again, not to drink the river water. Even if the ale tastes like wet wood and regret. You wake in the early dark hours of morning, again, because someone coughed too hard. Or maybe because your straw mattress shifted and now pokes you in new and exciting ways. But this time, it's not your aching back or the cold that keeps you awake. It's the sounds coming from the next room. Well, room is generous. It's a shared space, barely divided by a hanging cloth. The moans, the low murmuring, the creaking wood. It's all a very medieval lullaby. And no, it's not ghosts. It's your parents. Ah, yes, medieval romance. You roll over and stuff a bit of rag into your ears. There's no privacy in a cottage that's 15 feet across and home to 7 people, 3 chickens, and possibly a pig. Relationships here don't have space for mystery or grand declarations. Love letters? Not unless you're literate, rich, and happen to own paper. Here, marriage is rarely about love. It's a transaction, land, labor, and the continuation of the family line. You rise with the light, avoiding eye contact with everyone, because it's less awkward that way. Someone's already feeding the chickens. Someone else is emptying the chamber pot. Romance is over. It's just another day. You're of marrying age, by the way, and no one's asked how you feel about that. If you're female, your marriage might be arranged by your father to merge fields or settle a debt. If you're male, you're expected to take a wife soon as you can support one, which, let's face it, is a very generous use of the word support. Your future spouse may live in the next cottage, or several villages away. You may have exchanged a few words. You may not. But once you're married, that's it. Till death, by plague, childbirth, infection, or war, do you part. Historians often debate how unhappy medieval marriages really were. Some couples grew fond of each other, even affectionate. Others simply coexisted, like roommates who occasionally reproduced. The bar is low. If he doesn't beat you and she doesn't insult your barley yield, that's a good match. For women, the risks are higher, much higher. Childbirth is less a beautiful miracle and more a near-death experience with a 50-50 outcome. There's no prenatal care, no ultrasounds, and definitely no epidurals. There's a midwife, usually a local woman with experience and a lot of firm encouragement, and maybe a priest hovering nearby just in case they need to deliver last rites during labour. You've seen it before. The screaming, the blood, the tense silence when the baby doesn't cry right away, the weeping when it does. But the mother doesn't open her eyes again. Life begins and ends in the same room. You heard that in some villages, women try to give birth upright, gripping ropes or using birthing stools. Others lie on straw. They're given concoctions of herbs, some helpful, some hallucinogenic. One neighbour swore by boiled fennel and honey wine. Another had a charm with St. Margaret's name stitched into her shift. Still, For every child who lives, there are two who don't. You bury them quietly, sometimes without names, sometimes without witnesses. You just go back to work the next day. And sex? Well, it's not private, romantic, or particularly safe. You're in a room with your whole family. The walls are made of wattle and daub. If you're lucky, someone coughs loudly at the right moment. There's no birth control, not reliable anyway. Some women chew on juniper berries or insert wool soaked in vinegar. Others rely on chaste living, which is not exactly foolproof in a marriage. One fringe practice involves wearing a dried weasel as a charm. You don't ask how it's worn, you just try not to think about it. The church, of course, has very specific rules. Marital relations are permitted, but only for procreation. No pleasure, no weirdness, no doing it on Sundays, feast days, or during Lent, which basically leaves you with 4 usable nights a month, assuming you're not exhausted from harvesting turnips. You meet a girl once, Alice from 2 villages over. She has a kind smile and a single silver tooth. You trade a few words, maybe a few laughs at a feast. Nothing scandalous. Still, someone whispers. Her mother pulls her away. You never see her again, because just speaking too freely can ruin your reputation, especially if you're a woman. Too many smiles, too much eye contact. Suddenly you're loose. And if you're unmarried and visibly pregnant, well, may the saints have mercy, because the villagers won't. You could be whipped, exiled, or forced to do public penance barefoot in front of the church. Even married couples face judgment. If you're suspected of not doing your duty to produce heirs, people start asking questions. They never ask the man. There's a man in your village who lives alone. He never married. Some say he's simple. Others whisper different things. No one says them aloud. But he walks alone. He eats alone. He sits at the edge of festivals and leaves before the dancing starts. People who don't fit the mold don't last long. As you lie back down that night, listening to the soft breathing of your siblings, the squeak of the bed frame next door, and the occasional fart from the pig beneath the floorboards, you think about what love really is here. It's not moonlit walks or handwritten sonnets. It's survival. It's shared chores and strong backs and hands that don't flinch when they pull splinters from your skin. You're not looking for passion. You're looking for someone who won't let you die alone in the straw. And in medieval times, that's probably as good as it gets. You're in the middle of tying your boots with frozen fingers, again, when you hear the horn. One long blast from the hill, a sound that chills the bone even more than winter. It's a call to arms. You freeze, not because you're brave, but because you know what that sound means. The Lord's men are raising the levy. And you, congratulations. You've just been drafted into a war you don't understand, for a cause you don't believe in, to fight people you've never met. You rush to the green, where dozens of men like you, farmers, shepherds, millers, brewers, are gathered in loose lines. Most are wide-eyed and shivering. A few are already weeping. You join the back, hoping maybe someone forgets to count that high. They don't. A knight, shining literally and figuratively in full armor, stands at the front barking orders. He looks like a hero from a storybook, except that in this story, you're the disposable extra. He's got a horse, a sword, and a helmet with an actual feather plume. You're handed a spear. It's slightly crooked, and possibly sticky. You've never held a weapon in your life. And now you're expected to march for days, fight for hours, and survive on stale bread and fear. No training, no armor, just your tunic, your blistered feet, and that one sharp stick. Historians still argue whether medieval levies were truly effective, or if they were just moving walls of bodies meant to distract professional soldiers long enough for the real fighters to do the killing. Based on your current outfit, patched hose and a lice-infested hood, you're guessing you're the distraction. The march begins. You walk for miles, then more miles, through rain, mud, snow. The road is little more than churned filth. Your feet blister. Your shoulders ache from the spear. You sleep in barns, under hedges, in ditches. No one really knows where you're going. You ask once. Someone mutters, "To the king's border." Or maybe the duke's. Doesn't matter. You pass corpses on the roadside, some human, some animal. None buried. Flies still cling to them, even in the cold. One man in your line throws up, another just keeps walking. When you finally reach the battlefield, you're not prepared. Not mentally, not physically, not in any sense of the word. You were told there'd be glory, honor, but what you see is chaos. Men screaming, horses trampling bodies, arrows hissing through the air like whispers from angry ghosts. The knight from before rides past you. His sword is already red. You clutch your spear tighter. A soldier charges at you, and you lunge wildly, not with strategy, but with pure panic. Your spear catches something. You don't even look. You just keep moving. A young man next to you is hit with an arrow in the thigh. He screams, falls, and tries to crawl away. A horse finishes the job without meaning to. You can't breathe. You're not sure you want to breathe. And then, somehow it's over. You don't know if you won or lost. All you know is you're alive. Your clothes are soaked. Your boots are gone, literally torn from your feet in the mud. Your hands are shaking. Someone says to gather the wounded. Someone else starts looting bodies. You do neither. You just sit. Later, back at a makeshift camp, a priest gives a blessing over a pile of corpses. You can't tell which side they were on. It doesn't matter. They all look the same now. You're handed a stale crust of bread and a cup of wine so sour it could clean an arrowhead. You chew slowly. You don't speak. No one does. The return home is slower, quieter. There are fewer of you. Some died. Some fled. Some simply disappeared. Whether they're hiding in woods or buried in ditches, you'll never know. When you finally reach your village, days later, no one greets you like a hero. Your mother weeps softly. Your brother stares at your filthy clothes and asks if you brought anything back. You shake your head. You have nothing, not even your spear. Your body aches for weeks. A cough settles into your lungs like a squatter. Your dreams are haunted by faces you can't name. War, you realize, isn't glorious. It's wet. It's loud. It's dumb. One neighbor lost an eye. Another lost his arm. Both of them still have to pay taxes. The Lord offers no reward, no payment, just a nod and a reminder that duty is noble. You hear rumors of another conflict brewing in the east. Someone insulted someone else's banner, or daughter, or dog. Doesn't matter. You start sleeping in your boots, because in medieval times, war doesn't knock. It barges in, and it doesn't care who's ready. It begins with a cough. Not yours, but someone's nearby. Wet, chesty. The kind that makes heads turn and stomachs clench. You pretend not to hear it, but deep down, you already know. Something's coming. Within days, more villagers start coughing, then fevers, then strange black swellings in the armpits and groin. The air smells different, stale, tinged with sweat, bile, and something earthy, like turned soil after a storm. It clings to everything. The church bell, the firewood, even the straw in your mattress. They say it started in the next town over. Then it spread on the road, from trader to child, from baker to blacksmith. You hear the word whispered, plague, like it's a curse that can summon itself just by being said aloud. You don't have the luxury of disbelief. You've seen 3 bodies today alone. The church says it's divine punishment for your sins, your gluttony, your impure thoughts, for daring to want more than gruel and grief. The priest calls for penance, whipping, prayer. The line outside the chapel stretches long, pale-faced and trembling. Historians still argue whether people understood the plague as a disease or divine wrath, but either way, the fear was real. You see it in every glance, every locked door, every cart pulled slowly down the street with a heap of still limbs and a whispered, "Bring out your dead." There's no doctor coming. There are plague doctors, far away in cities, dressed like birds in beaked masks stuffed with herbs. But you'll never see one. They're reserved for nobles and towns that can pay. Here, your healer is a farmer's widow with a talent for herbal poultices and an extremely brave cat. You try everything. Burn rosemary. Tie garlic to your wrists. Someone suggests strapping a live chicken to your boils. Because if you're going to die, why not go out itchy and feathered? A man down the road shaves a cross into his scalp and walks barefoot in circles, chanting for mercy. Another lights a fire in his home to purify the air and ends up burning half the wall down. People are desperate. And desperate people don't think clearly. A woman accuses her neighbour of cursing her goat. Her neighbour is dragged to the village centre and tied to a post. She pleads, cries, swears she did nothing. Someone throws a stone. Someone else follows. The crowd grows. You turn away. There's no law anymore. No reeve. No lord. The manor is locked and barred. Its noble family vanished 2 nights ago under cover of darkness, left without a word. Took the horses, the hounds, and all the salt. And so the village turns inward. Suspicious, twitchy. Every sneeze is a threat. Every saw a death sentence. You check yourself constantly. Your neck, your armpits. You feel fine. But what does fine even mean? You flinch when someone talks too close. You've stopped hugging your mother. The burial pits grow deeper. Sometimes you help dig, with whatever tools remain. Sometimes with your hands. The ground is hard, cold, unforgiving. You try not to look at the faces, but sometimes you recognize them. The old baker who gave you a crust for free last winter. The girl with the crooked tooth who danced at the last feast. And then one morning, you wake to silence. The kind of silence that presses on your ears like wool. No birds, no bells. You open the door and see a dog chewing on a linen-wrapped limb. You shut it quickly. You sit at the table, alone. You haven't eaten in 2 days. You haven't wanted to. Even your stomach knows better. And then you cough, just once. Short, dry. You freeze. Number. Please no. You press your hand to your neck. Nothing. No swelling. Yet, that night, you sleep with your boots on and a knife under your pillow. You dream of boats, fire, and faces you can't name. You survive the next day and the next. Eventually, the coughing stops. Fewer bells, fewer carts. The death slows. It doesn't end, but it loosens its grip. You step outside one morning and see green shoots breaking through the soil. And you cry, not because you're better, but because you're still here. Somehow, barely. The plague doesn't care about your plans. It comes, it kills, and then it leaves. Without apology, without explanation. No one writes down your name. No one records your suffering. You're not in any books, but you lived through it. And in the end, that's the only miracle you're allowed. You made it, traveller. Through smoke and mud, through hunger and heartbreak, through long nights of bitter cold and longer days of bitter ale. You survived medieval life, with all its biting winds, questionable soup, and the kind of dental care that involved wood and hope. Now, let's slow things down. Take a breath. Let your shoulders relax. The fields are quiet now. The bells have stopped ringing. The sky has gone soft and purple over the thatched rooftops, and the last embers in the hearth glow like tiny suns in the dark. There's no rush here, no Lord's Reeve, no tolling church bell, no call to arms, just silence. Picture your straw bed again, now less itchy, less crowded. The blanket warmer, the candlelight lower. Maybe there's a cat curled at your feet, purring softly. Maybe you can finally close your eyes without wondering what fresh disaster the morning will bring. Your boots are off, your hands are clean, and the air smells not of fire and sweat, but of something gentler. Wood smoke, wildflowers, or maybe a memory from home. You're safe, you're warm, and for tonight at least, you're not in medieval times anymore. Sleep well, brave soul, you've earned it.